now that we've calculated the ROI and the yield, the other set of calculations that I like to do are to calculate what I would get if we had to take the property back and do an REO. Usually this number will be higher. That's why it's really important to check your valuations. If you see that the property is worth quite a bit compared to how much you're going to pay for it, then you know that you should make money. So some people won't even calculate that to begin with, just because if the ROI and the yield on it reperforming are good and you know the fair market value's there to support it, then you don't necessarily need to calculate it on the front end. But I like to do it just so I have an idea of what to expect. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to take our fair market value low and high. So what we're going to do is you want to calculate everything worst case scenario off your lows. So our low value here is 46,000. So we're going to take 46,000 and subtract out our bid. And again, if you had your full expenses, you would want to be throwing that in there, because really without full expenses, this number could be very deceiving. So this is roughly what we should gross if we take the property back and sell it, assuming that it's in good condition, that we can get the 46,000 for it, and we have not calculated any other expenses. This number here is pretty much useless because we haven't added any expenses. You could do a real quick calculation, and if you see it's only like 10,000 or less, then it's probably not worth it. But what you really want to calculate is selling it for roughly probably 90% of what it's worth. That way you can move it at a quick pace so you don't have a bunch of carrying costs. And then you can count on probably paying or only getting 90% of what you collect, because you're going to have to pay fees to the realtor for selling it. You're going to have closing fees, and you're going to have taxes on it. So what I do, instead of taking 90% of 90%, I just take 80% of the original. And that's usually what you could get. So what we'll do here is this will be basic expenses. So for basic expenses, we're going to take 80% of our gross up here. And so realistically, this is what we should expect to get once we add in some other expenses to our accepted bid. So this is a basic idea. For most CFDs, assuming it's not a really crazy state where things are more expensive, foreclosures and things take longer, for CFD, I would typically count anywhere from $5,000 to $7,000 added on to expenses. If you can add 7 on there and still make the numbers work, then that's better, because it'll give you more cushion. So in fact, let's go ahead and do that right now. We're just going to add $5,000 on, so we get $17,805. We're doing that just because Missouri shouldn't be too expensive. Plus, since I have more than one note, I kind of get economy of scales on things, so that should be a fairly safe number for us to go. And so we're going to now calculate it with total expenses subtracted. So it's going to be this number, just minus an extra $5,000, since that's what we added on. So right now we're looking at, if we REO this, nothing needs to be done on the inside or outside, nothing that's beyond basic. We don't have long, lengthy legal battle or anything like that. Then we should get roughly $21,500 if we take this property back and are able to sell it for 90% of our low value, pay for the realtor, and pay other taxes and other closing expenses. $21,500 paycheck, pretty good, especially considering, we're looking at it now roughly a $17,000 or not quite an $18,000 investment. And that's if worse comes to worse and we have to foreclose. I guess we could also count if you did a deed in lieu. That could be a pretty sweet deal as well. With a deed in lieu, there's enough meat on here to where you could offer the borrower, hey, look, it's not working out. Why don't we give you, $1,000 or $1,500, even $2,000 to deed it back to us, leave it in good shape, and walk away. So the last thing we need to calculate here is just quick ROI. It's a little bit redundant at this point because if you get $21,000 back on a $17,000 investment, that's a pretty good day's worth of work. But you know what? We'll go ahead and calculate it. So we're going to take this, our total, what we would make after all the expenses have been subtracted. We're going to divide it by our expenses, our initial investment amount here. So that gives us roughly 121% return. Not too shabby, especially considering CFD shouldn't take too long if we have to foreclose / forfeiture / evict the borrower and get them out of there. And so there's plenty of room on this deal where if we can't get the borrower to work with us, we'll take it back and we'll make some money that way. And really, we could even go into calculating what we would do if we were going to do owner financing.